When was the last time you opened a tin of chopped tomatoes, took a spoon, and tasted what was actually inside? Not after you smothered it with garlic, onion, oregano, and a desperate squirt of tomato paste to stop your dinner tasting like metallic bathwater. I mean straight out of the can. If you did, you probably noticed the truth. Most of what you pour into your Sunday bolognese is a watery, sour, pale nightmare. For generations across Australia, that bright red tin sat at the back of every pantry without anyone giving it a second thought. It was the ultimate budget staple, sitting quietly between the baked beans and the tuna, doing its job without drama. You grabbed a couple of tins from Woolies or Coles every week, trusted that a tomato was just a tomato, and went home to feed your family. You never stood in the aisle squinting at the fine print on an 80-cent can. Why would you? It is fruit, juice, and a lid. What could possibly go wrong? As it turns out, pretty much everything. By the end of this video, you will know exactly which 9 supermarket brands are taking you for a ride, which 4 tins are actually worth buying, and how a sneaky legal loophole allows manufacturers to flood your can with water while legally calling the whole mess chopped tomatoes. I will show you why your quick 15-minute pasta sauce suddenly takes 40 minutes of high-heat simmering just to stop bleeding liquid across your plate, and how that cheap bargain tin quietly inflates your energy bills. We will crack open the supply chain scandals, the hidden acidity regulators propping up unripened fruit, and the silent retreat of local regulators on chemical can linings that Europe has already banned. And stick around for the top spot on our avoid list, one of the most widely distributed, heavily trusted brands in the country that gives you less actual fruit than almost anyone else. Before we name a single brand on Australian shelves, we need to talk about how a tin of chopped tomatoes is actually made, because the industry relies on you not knowing the difference between food and cleverly disguised processing. A proper tin of tomatoes requires 2 things: field-ripened, deep red tomatoes, and a tiny splash of natural tomato juice to fill air gaps. That is it. When tomatoes are picked at peak summer ripeness, heavy with natural sugars, rich in glutamates, and bursting with deep red pigment, they do not need help. They break down in a hot pan into a velvety, sweet sauce in about 5 minutes flat. But peak ripeness requires patience, immaculate weather, and immediate local processing, which costs real money. To cut costs, industrial processors packing private label tins for giant supermarket chains harvest early using mechanized harvesters that strip whole fields in one go, pulling down hard, pale, semi-ripe fruit alongside the good stuff. When you tin semi-ripe tomatoes, they lack natural sweetness, deep red color, and their liquid is thin and aggressively sour. So how do you fix a tin of sour, unripened fruit water? You introduce the industry's favorite cheap band-aid, citric acid, or additive E330. Industrial food-grade citric acid dumped into cheap canned goods is mass-produced via fungal fermentation of black mold feeding on corn syrup. In the canning industry, it serves as a chemical preservative and acidity regulator. Food safety standards dictate that canned low-acid foods like tomatoes must maintain a strict pH level below 4.6 to prevent bacterial growth during shelf storage. When processors use premium, naturally acidic, fully ripened tomatoes, that balance happens naturally. But when they dilute the tin with excessive tap water and lower-grade tomato byproduct, they must douse the contents with synthetic citric acid to force the pH down. The result is that sharp, metallic sourness that hits the back of your throat when you taste a budget tin. Then comes the magic trick of liquid displacement. Under Australian food labelling regulations managed by Food Standards Australia New Zealand, a tin labelled as chopped tomatoes must declare its percentage of tomato ingredients. But manufacturers can combine solid fruit chunks with added tomato juice or reconstituted tomato puree to reach their stated total. That means a tin claiming 60% tomato content might only contain 40% actual solid tomato flesh, with the rest consisting of added water, thin pureed waste runoff, and acidity regulators. You are not paying for sweet, sun-ripened produce. You are paying premium freight prices to carry tap water in an aluminium container. Think of it like buying a second-hand car where the seller fills half the petrol tank with tap water, throws in an additive so the engine barely turns over, and charges you full price for fuel. When you tip that watery tin into a frying pan, you are forced to spend 20 minutes boiling off excess water just to get a sauce that does not turn your spaghetti into soup. You pay for extra electricity or gas, extra tomato paste to fix the pale color, and sugar to mask the harsh fungal citric acid. The cheap tin at the checkout was never cheap. It just deferred its real cost until you got home to your stove. Let quotes get straight into the wall of shame sitting on Australian supermarket shelves, starting with number 9. Woolworths Essentials Chopped Tomatoes. Woolworths sells itself as the fresh food people, leaning heavily on local Aussie agriculture and green family values. So you would assume their baseline budget offering would at least deliver basic quality. At around $1.00 for a 400-gram tin, it looks like an absolute steal. But inspect the back label and the illusion falls apart. The tomato content hovers right down at 60%, with 40% taken up by added tomato juice and synthetic citric acid, additive E330. When you tip it into a hot skillet, the tomato pieces disintegrate into tiny fibrous flecks floating in pale, pinkish water. Choice independent testing and consumer reviews consistently highlight that this product requires extensive reduction time just to form a coherent base. You are essentially paying $1 for a can of acidic water and tomato scraps. As food industry specialist Dr. Sarah Higgins noted, when solid fruit content drops below 2/3 of total volume, consumers are paying standard freight costs for added processing water. Woolworths Essentials gives you the legal minimum, proving that being the biggest supermarket in Australia does not mean giving you the best value. Number 8. Heinz chopped tomatoes. Heinz is an absolute giant in Australian pantries. A legacy brand shoppers grab automatically off Coles and Woolies shelves without looking at the price tag. At upwards of $2.20 per tin, you pay a massive premium for that iconic red shield. But inside, Heinz chopped tomatoes contain around 60% to 65% tomato, stuffed with added juice and acidity regulators, offering zero organic certification and zero meaningful transparency regarding where raw tomatoes are harvested before canning. Despite positioning itself as a premium pantry staple, the ingredient deck is virtually identical to home brand cans, costing less than half the price. When you pour it into a pan, you get a sharp, overly acidic hit that requires a heavy pinch of sugar to balance out. Independent consumer review panels routinely rank Heinz near the bottom for raw flavor intensity, with verified buyers complaining that the sauce turns watery and dull within minutes of simmering. You are paying a 100% price markup purely for brand recognition and nostalgic marketing. Heinz relies on your habit, not their quality. It is a classic corporate strategy. Coast on decades of consumer trust while quietly cheapening raw input ingredients. Number 7. Coles Italian chopped tomatoes. Coles spends millions telling Australians how much they care about quality and value, positioning their private label red brand tins right at eye level across the country. Priced at approximately $1.15, it sits in that middle ground where shoppers expect a decent everyday product. But pull back the lid and you are greeted by an uninspiring mixture sitting right around 60% fruit content, padded out with processing juice and fungal citric acid. What makes this particularly frustrating is the corporate history behind global canned tomato procurement. Reports by international labour watchdogs and supply chain auditors have repeatedly highlighted how Italian tomato processors, who supply private labels globally, including major Southern Hemisphere retailers, have historically relied on exploited migrant labour under the caporalato brokering system in southern Italy. While Coles maintains strict supplier codes of conduct and claims compliance with modern slavery regulations, hyper-competitive pricing pressure forced onto overseas processors inevitably leads to quality trade-offs on the factory floor. The result in your kitchen? Pale, unripened tomato chunks mixed with hard green stem pieces that refuse to soften no matter how long you boil them. A typical customer review sums it up. Tastes sour, watery, and left a thin red puddle at the bottom of my plate. You pay for polished supermarket marketing while getting bottom-tier factory runoff. If you are already itching to check your own pantry to see which of these tins is sitting on your shelf, hit that subscribe button right now, because this investigation only gets rougher from here. Number 6. Annalisa, chopped tomatoes. Annalisa is an Italian-style brand widely distributed across Woolworths, Coles, and independent IGAs, heavily utilizing Italian flags and rustic Mediterranean imagery to signal authentic European quality. Sitting at around $1.60 to $1.80 a tin, it tricks you into thinking you are stepping up from generic budget brands. But read the fine print. Annalisa's chopped range sits at roughly 60% tomato fruit, drowned in tomato juice and chemical acidity regulators. In culinary comparison tests, Annalisa frequently disappoints because the fruit is chopped into tiny, mushy fragments that lack structural integrity. When exposed to heat, it does not break down into a rich sugo. It instantly separates into solid pulp floating in sour liquid. Australian food critics and home cooks point out that despite fancy Italian branding, Annalisa delivers an identical, watery result to basic budget tins. You pay a premium for an Italian flag printed on a paper wrapper, while the product inside fails the basic pan test. It is a masterclass in regional marketing masking a thoroughly ordinary product. Number 5. Community Co. chopped tomatoes. Distributed heavily through independent IGA stores and local grocers, Community Co. advertises itself as the ethical choice that gives back to local causes. It sounds warm, wholesome, and responsible, but good intentions do not compensate for a poor product. Priced around $1.40, Community Co. chopped tomatoes deliver the same industrial baseline. Low tomato content around 60%, padded with added liquid and citric acid. The practical reality in the kitchen is stark. Customers report an aggressive, sharp sourness that overpowers delicate herbs and spices, requiring extra tomato paste and prolonged cooking times just to burn off excess liquid. The price per tin might seem reasonable, but when you factor in additional gas, electricity, and rescue ingredients, the true cost climbs rapidly. Community Co. leans on emotional appeal, but when you strip away the wholesome packaging, you are left with the exact same industrial shortcuts used by corporate giants. Number 4. ALDI Romano chopped tomatoes. ALDI has conquered a massive slice of the Australian grocery market by promising top-tier quality at rock-bottom discount prices. Their flagship Romano chopped tomatoes sit on the shelf at an unbeatable 95 cents, making it one of the most purchased tins in the country. For families watching every dollar, it looks like a miracle. But ALDI achieves that price point through aggressive global procurement models that drive unit production costs down to the floor. The tomato content sits at the absolute minimum legal threshold of 60%, with 40% of the can filled with thin juice and E330 citric acid. Furthermore, ALDI provides virtually zero supply chain traceability on the label, beyond a generic "imported from Italy" stamp. What does that mean in your pan? An extremely watery consistency that requires twice as long to reduce down into a usable pasta sauce. While ALDI deserves credit for using BPA-free can linings on many private label lines, the product inside remains an ultra-cheap, highly diluted commodity. As culinary editor Mark Richardson observed, bargain canned tomatoes are a false economy. You lose in cooking time and flavor concentration what you save at the checkout register. Number 3. Valverde chopped tomatoes. Valverde is a familiar sight in independent supermarkets, Italian delis, and major chains, marketed as a traditional, authentic Italian choice for serious home cooks. Selling at around $1.70 to $1.90, it carries an aura of heritage and quality. But independent analysis reveals the same tired formula. Approximately 60% diced tomatoes, supplemented with tomato juice and citric acid. In blind kitchen tests, Valverde consistently suffers from texture separation, where the watery phase drains away from solid fruit on the plate, leaving pasta sitting in a pool of pink liquid. Furthermore, consumer feedback mentions hard, fibrous skin remnants and unripened yellow patches on tomato pieces. You pay near premium prices for a product that fails to deliver a uniform, naturally sweet sauce. Valverde proves that a traditional name and classic label design are no guarantee of superior agricultural standards inside the can. Number 2. Legos chopped tomatoes. Legos is an absolute titan of the Australian sauce aisle, famous for long-standing slogans and a heavy presence across every supermarket in the nation. When Australians think of Italian-style cooking, Legos is often the first name that comes to mind. But look closely at their canned chopped tomato range, priced around $2.20 per 400-gram tin. Despite being one of the most expensive non-organic options on the shelf, the formula remains disappointingly standard. Roughly 60% to 65% tomato content, topped up with added tomato juice and acidity regulators. For a brand that built its commercial empire on tomato paste and rich pasta sauces, their standard canned fruit offering is remarkably thin and uninspired. It lacks the natural sweetness of tree-ripened fruit, forcing home cooks to rely heavily on added sugar, salt, and extra paste to build depth of flavor. Legos charges a top-tier price for an average, mass-produced product resting entirely on brand loyalty built up over generations. And that brings us to number 1 on our avoid list. Always fresh chopped tomatoes. Distributed nationwide across Woolworths, Coles, and independent retailers, Always Fresh positions itself as a high-end, premium Mediterranean brand. With sleek packaging and a price tag often exceeding $2.40 per tin, consumers naturally assume they are purchasing the absolute best option on the supermarket shelf. This is where the deception stings most. Despite the premium price tag, the ingredient profile remains stuck at the same industrial level as 90-cent budget cans. Approximately 60% tomato, diluted with processing juice and synthetic citric acid. There is no organic certification, no single origin estate sourcing, and no elevated solid fruit ratio. In practical culinary applications, Always Fresh fails to justify its cost in every single category. It exhibits the exact same watery separation, sharp citric bite, and need for extended boiling as the cheapest home brand tins on the market. You pay a massive premium for a brand name that promises fresh, artisanal quality while delivering standard factory line efficiency. It tops our list because the gap between what you pay, what the label implies, and what lands in your cooking pot is the widest of any brand in Australia. Right, here comes the part that made watching this far worth it. There is zero reason to keep settling for metallic water and fungal additives when genuinely exceptional options sit on those exact same Australian supermarket shelves, often for just a few extra cents. The brands on this list earned their spot by rejecting industry shortcuts, offering absolute supply chain transparency, and packing actual sun-ripened fruit into the tin instead of processing runoff. First up on our recommended list, macro-organic chopped tomatoes, available across Woolworths stores nationwide for around $1.65 a tin. If you are shopping on a strict budget but want to eliminate synthetic chemical residues, this is where your search begins. Certified organic by ACO, Australian Certified Organic, Macro ensures raw tomatoes are cultivated without synthetic pesticides or chemical fertilizers. Inside the can, you get certified organic tomatoes and organic tomato juice, completely free from added salt or synthetic citric acid. Woolworths also utilizes BPA-free food-grade linings across their organic private label range, removing hormone-disrupting chemicals from the equation. In the kitchen, Macro delivers a clean, light, naturally balanced tomato flavor with a bright red hue. It requires a little reduction time compared to top-tier artisanal options, but at $1.65, the price-to-quality ratio is outstanding. It is the ideal everyday workhorse tin for weekday soups, stews, and casseroles, where you want clean ingredients without breaking the bank. Second, Ardmona crushed vine-ripened tomatoes, selling for around $2.00 to $2.35 per 400-gram tin across Coles, Woolies, and independent IGAs. If supporting local Australian agriculture matters to you, Ardmona is the undisputed local champion. Grown in Victoria's famous Goulburn Valley by Australian farming families, these tomatoes are picked at peak summer ripeness and packed within 24 hours of harvesting. Read the ingredient list and you will see a massive contrast to imported budget lines. 99% Australian tomatoes, crushed fruit and natural juice, with no added sugar, no added salt, no artificial preservatives, and no added citric acid. Because Ardmona processes naturally sweet, vine-ripened local fruit, they do not need to artificially force down pH with fungal additives. When you pour Ardmona into a hot pan, you immediately notice a deep, rich aroma and a naturally thick texture that coats the back of a wooden spoon. Independent tasting panels repeatedly rate Ardmona as the finest Australian-grown canned tomato on the market. The only minor drawback? Because Australian labour and agricultural standards are among the highest in the world, it costs slightly more than cheap European imports. But paying $2 for 99% pure local fruit while supporting Aussie farmers is a trade-off that makes complete sense every single time. Third, Mutti Pulpa finely chopped tomatoes, priced between $2.35 and $2.85 per 400-gram tin across Woolworths, Coles, ALDI, and Harris Farm markets. Mutti is universally recognised by professional chefs, food scientists, and blind taste testing panels as the absolute benchmark for canned tomatoes. Founded in Parma, Italy, over 120 years ago, Mutti operates on a simple philosophy. Perfection requires uncompromising raw ingredients. While rival brands dilute their cans with 40% added liquid, Mutti Pulpa contains an astonishing 99.8% sun-ripened Italian tomatoes and a tiny pinch of sea salt. That is literally it. No added water, no tomato paste, no preservatives, and zero citric acid. Mutti uses a patented cold crushing process that removes skins and seeds while preserving the fresh, vibrant cell structure of the fruit. The moment you pop the ring pull lid, the difference is striking. An intense ruby red color and a sweet, fragrantly floral aroma with zero sharp metallic harshness. In a saucepan, Mutti Pulpa does not separate into water and solids. It thickens effortlessly into a luxurious, sweet sugo in under 10 minutes without requiring a single grain of added sugar or a squirt of paste. As award-winning Sydney chef Anthony Moretti put it during an independent sauce trial, Mutti Pulpa tastes like you went into an Italian garden in February, picked a ripe tomato off the vine, and crushed it straight into your dish. It costs about $1 more than generic store brands, But because you save on cooking gas, extra paste, and sugar, it actually delivers superior net value. It is the gold standard for pasta sauces, pizza toppings, and quick garlic and basil reductions. Fourth, and finally, for absolute culinary luxury, Strianese San Marzano DOP whole peeled tomatoes. Available at Harris Farm Markets, specialty Italian grocers, and select gourmet aisles in major supermarkets for around $3.80 to $4.50. If you are cooking a slow-simmered Sunday ragu, an authentic Neapolitan pizza, or a dish where the tomato is the undisputed hero, this is the ultimate choice. Certified DOP, Protected Designation of Origin, these tomatoes are grown exclusively in the nutrient-rich volcanic soil surrounding Mount Vesuvius in Campania, Italy. They are hand-harvested when fully ripe, gently steam-peeled, and packed whole in their own natural velvety juice. San Marzano tomatoes are naturally lower in acid, higher in natural sugars, and contain significantly fewer seeds than standard round processing tomatoes. When you crush them by hand straight into the pan, they release a deep, savory richness and a silky texture that no commercial chopped tomato can ever replicate. Yes, it is a premium product aimed at serious home cooks, but the flavor depth it imparts to a slow-cooked sauce is utterly transformative. So whether you choose the affordable clean profile of Macro, the 100% Australian agricultural pride of Ardmona, the flawless everyday perfection of Mutti, or the artisanal luxury of Strianese, you are finally taking control of what goes into your family's food. Now that you know which brands are taking you for a ride and which ones actually respect your dinner, let's lock in 5 simple rules for choosing canned tomatoes yourself next time you stand in the supermarket aisle. First, always flip the can around and inspect the tomato percentage on the back panel. If solid fruit content drops below 70%, leave it right there on the shelf. Second, check the ingredient list for citric acid or additive E330. Top-tier brands using genuinely sun-ripened fruit never need synthetic acid to force down the pH. Third, beware of vague claims like imported from Italy without specific regional traceability or ACO organic certification, as industrial processors frequently re-export cheap bulk paste through European factories. Fourth, look for explicit BPA-free labeling on the can lining to protect your family from endocrine-disrupting chemicals leaching into acidic foods. Fifth, calculate real value by factoring in liquid volume. A cheaper, watery tin that requires 20 extra minutes of simmering gas and a squirt of rescue paste ultimately costs you more money than a premium product that cooks in 5 minutes flat. The core takeaway is simple. Major supermarket chains rely on consumer passivity, assuming nobody bothers to read fine print on a basic 90-cent pantry item. By understanding how processing shortcuts, added water, and clever marketing dilute basic quality, you stop being a victim of quiet supermarket margin padding and take back control of your weekly grocery budget. Changing your everyday shopping habits does not require spending a fortune. It just requires choosing the handful of brands that put genuine, sun-ripened produce into the tin instead of industrial runoff. Thank you for watching and backing independent consumer investigations that hold big brands accountable. If you want to help protect your friends and family from wasting money on watery junk, share this video with someone who cooks pasta every week. They will definitely thank you for it. Drop a comment below and tell me, which brand of tinned tomatoes is sitting in your pantry right now? And did any of the brands on our avoid list surprise you? Make sure you check out our deep dive expose on supermarket olive oil coming up next on the screen right now. Until next time, stay informed, stay sharp, and protect your plate.